This is what I have to use these days.
Oh,
See this thing?
good morning, everyone.
Maybe I
We're
shouldn't be
we're
showing this
we're
yet.
live now.
Okay,
So, good morning,
perfect timing,
and
right?
good morning, everyone, and thank you for your patience with us as we get everything together. My name's Kiana Whitted. I'm a professor of English and African American Studies at the University of South Carolina. We are getting started with this panel on graphic publishing and the graphic novel frontier. And I'm honored to be joined here today with five folks. Chuck Brown is joining us in a moment, but Joel Christian Gill is here, Bill Campbell, and Sanford Green. Welcome, welcome. We're going to spend the next 55 minutes now hearing a little bit about their career in comics, practical advice they can share, and words of wisdom from highs and maybe some lows of their experience. I'm especially excited because we have a lot of different types of people who work in comics represented on this panel. There are writers, artists, cartoonists who do both, an editor who's also publishes comics, and these folks have worked with small presses, self-published, large mainstream licensed products, the whole gamut. So this is going to be a good conversation. I'll just say before I go to their introductions or before they introduce themselves, as a point of information, our title for this panel says graphic novels, but you're going to just hear me use the word comics because it's all comics, comic books, comic strips, web comics. It's all comics. So if you're hearing me say that, it's because it's all included. So I'm going to ask uh, maybe Joel, you're top of my screen to get started introducing yourself and maybe say a little bit about the work you've done and what made you to decide to turn your interest in comics into a career.
So my name is Joel Christian Gill. I am professor and chair of the MFA in Visual Narrative at Boston University. So I run an MFA program in comics. I'm a cartoonist and historian. I've done a series of graphic um, Strange Unsolved Narratives from Black History was my first series of books, which are comics about obscure Black history. And I do longer form narratives on some individuals, obscure individuals in African American history, Tales of the Talented Tent. And I've done a memoir about my life called Fights, One Voice Triumph Over Violence. And I just finished doing the graphic novel adaptation for Dr. Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, which will be out in June this year and available online to pre-order. Like as of this morning, I think I saw the cover of the book on there. So, I don't think there was a time when I didn't want to draw comics, to be completely honest. When I was a kid, I wanted to draw comics. I started drawing comics when I was a kid, and I think I got sidetracked with my MFA in painting for about 10 years. But the way I typically tell people about it is that, like comics was my high school girlfriend, and we spent every day, all weekends, holding hands, doing everything we're supposed to. And then we went on to college, and we broke up,
Nice.
and I married painting, and I had a couple of kids, and it was all right, but it just didn't work out. And then one day in a coffee shop, I saw comics again, and we've been happily married ever since.
I love it. I love the different phases. Very nice. Very nice. I'm going to make an attempt as you guys are talking to share links in the chat to some of the books that you're mentioning, including the stamped adaptation that you just said is available like today, out for pre-order, not available, but for pre-order.
It's on Amazon. It's been on Amazon for a while. The cover just populated. So
okay, awesome. Sanford, let's hear from you next.
Well, my name is Sanford Green, and been a professional illustrator, comic illustrator for 10 to 20 years, somewhere in there. It's all a blur at this point. But I am, I've been doing this, obviously, like these gentlemen here, we've been in love with this medium since we were kids, and it kept me out of trouble. and it got me into a creative space as a young person. And I started to learn and uh, identify, my blackness, if you will, at a young age, thanks to characters like Luke Cage and Black Panther and Falcon. The few characters that they had over at DC, I'm sorry, at Marvel Comics. But from that point on, I started to, at a young age, create my own characters. Fast forward, started, seeing that this can be a viable career for me or possibility. As a young Black kid growing up in the South, that's not readily available to you, growing up, pre-internet, right before the internet became a thing. You had two choices, go off to school or go in the military, or you can just work, and there wasn't a whole lot of options. But for me, I was pretty stubborn in my, hubris, and thinking that this is what I want to do. And thank God, because, for anyone that's viewing right now, all the viewers, you are your biggest advocate. If you really aspire to do something like this in a creative space, you have to believe in your craft and believe that you can do this medium. And it's not an easy medium at all. I think it's the most challenging medium in all of the mediums. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going on a tangent. I know you want to talk about careers, but
No, this is it. This is it.
yeah. But for me, having that belief system and support system around me is what I feel sparks and kept me moving forward. And I'm very blessed to have been in this industry for over 20 years. Marvel Comics, DC Comics, and this little independent film called Black Panther came out a few years ago, and it did okay. And we started, yeah, you might have heard of it, but it did pretty good. And we started to see where the growing audience, or the audience that's always been there, is Black audience, the audience that hasn't been really catered to, over the years. And this was one of the first films. I mean, of course, we had other films, but this was the film that really showed that it's a viable audience. Sad to say, it took 50 years to Hollywood to figure that out. But comics has always been there, and they've always been at the forefront of this. And we were working at Marvel at the time. Chuck Brown's not here right now, but myself, David Walker, and Chuck Brown, we started to realize that we have this power in our stories, in our creativity. Now's the time to take the next step and create something for the next generation, if you will, or move forward in this space that we're in right now and that people are excited about. So we created this series called Bitter Root. It's about a family of monster hunters set during the Harlem Renaissance. They fight monsters that derive from hate. If you've heard of it before, you kind of know the rest of the premise of the story. And it was kind of like this perfect storm of what's happening in society at the time. Honestly, that's part of what sparked our creativity. That, along with seeing the excitement of the medium, the movies and the comics, where started seeing a lot more of us. And we knew that we had a pretty golden opportunity to create something that was, straight from, scratch, and create this new lane and avenue. And it opened up, we're proud to say it opened a lot of opportunities, not only for us, but for tons of other creators of color. We're excited about, all the things that we've been a part of with this venture. We, won a few awards and got a movie deal out of this thing that we're pretty excited about. So, again, yeah, that's our, I think that's one of the things that I'm the most excited about and grateful for, is that we saw this opportunity and we didn't shrink back and sometimes you can second guess, oh, are people really ready for something like this? Is this something that people will be into? And we got all walks of life supporting our product. And so we're just excited, and we're ready to do more exciting stories.
That's great. Thank you. And before we go to Bill, I will just note that I put some links to Bitterroot and the Luke Cage and Iron Fist in the chat for those who are watching. And I'll put some for Joel as well. And for Bill, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, sure, why not? Hey, I'm Bill Campbell. I'm head cook and bottle washer at Rosarium Publishing. I'm going to try to make this as short as possible. I mean, if you talk about tangents, like my whole life is a tangent, right? So unlike these two gentlemen, I've not been in love with comics my whole life. Basically, I decided I was going to be a writer when I was 9. That was because my mom used to be in charge of making industrial films for Westinghouse. So she pulled me out of school for a couple of weeks and took me to Hollywood so I could see the process. And I came back and I was just like, I'm going to write books. I don't know, because like I'm contrary. Like even at that age, they're like, make movies. Nah, I'll write books. But around that time too, my aunt was dating a Vietnam vet who was on disability, and all he read was comic books, and that's where I fell in love with him. So I wanted to write comic books. I wanted to draw. Most people don't know this, but I'll out myself now. I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. It was a teen program, and it was all like people wanted to do like fine art and commercial art, and then there was like us 4 comic book geeks. But basically, when I got 16 and got my license and comic books went to like $1 a copy, because minimum wage was $3 an hour. I was like, well, gas and girls, right? So fast forward many years later, I was doing the whole writing novels thing, and I had a fancy agent, wasn't doing anything for me. So I was self-publishing. And on my 3rd book, Coontown Killing Caper, I was doing a bunch of cons. I was doing like literally everything. I was doing craft markets, street fairs, book festivals. I got banned from a few, and comic book conventions. So 2 things happened in this period. One was 2 of my 3 novels entered academia. Sunshine Patriots, a guy started writing part of his PhD dissertation on it. Then Coontown, people started teaching it in universities. And I was like, that's weird. Like, I'm not good enough for a publisher, but I'm good enough for academia. Then the other thing happened was, because I was doing comic book festivals, I was meeting folks like, Chuck Collins and Keith Miller and, John Jennings. And at the time, 2012, like these people weren't being published. And I was like, this is effing criminal. And then so I was that. And then I was like, well, if I'm good enough for academia, not good enough for publishing, I can't be the only person. And then here are these groups of people that I'm meeting like all over the place, like Onyx Con and Ekbach and ColaCon, since you probably remember that. Isn't that where we met at the second one, right? Or the third one, whichever one it was, right? And I was just like, well, and I knew why. So I was just like, well, somebody has to publish these people. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy because, nobody likes an uppity Negro. But, I can carry that, because I'm from mining towns. So I'm used to being hated and I'm used to swinging back. So we're good. So that's how Rosarium started. So that's how I became a comic book publisher. I became a comics writer mainly because I was going crazy, because Rosarium was never for me, it was for other people. And that was fine and dandy, but after a while it just kind of messes with your head because you're always doing stuff for other people but you're not doing anything for yourself. So I just kind of started writing comics because I knew I never would have the time to write books. So that's how Bad Mothers happened. And then so that was my first comic graphic novel project. And then The Day the Klan Came to Town, which you're familiar with, was my second one. And then Refuge, the Voodoo Western, that's the third one, and that's coming out next month. Yeah, so it's all, as I said, like my life is a tangent. So that's kind of how that all came about.
Those are pretty good tangents.
I do what I can.
So, Sanford, you touched on this already, but I'm going to throw this question out again to the rest of you who are here about how things have changed for Black creators and Black voices being represented in comics. What differences have you noticed, say, in the last 10, 15 years? You mentioned Black Panther, but we know Black Panther's been around for a while. And even when it comes to the movies, we know before that, there's always Blade, right? Like there have been other Black movies and Black comics. Do you feel like there's something different happening now, or what changes are you noticing in these last decade or two?
Is that for well, anyway, I'll just answer.
Let's start with you. That's for everybody.
Yeah.
But Joe, let's start with you.
So the thing that I've noticed, it's almost like Hollywood and pop culture forgets about Black people for a little while, and then something makes a lot of money, and then they're just like, oh yeah, right, Black people got money too. It's like that happens, right? And it seems very cyclical, right? Like in the late 60s, you got Sweetback's Badass Song. In the 80s, you get the Cosby Show. You get 70s, you get like Good Times. You get all these different happens cyclically, right? Milestone in the early 90s. And so, and this time, it just happened to, like this sort of like most recent in like the last 5 or 6 years has been the explosion of Black representation and things. Like during, I don't know if Bill, you and Sanford, you probably had the exact same thing during all of the protests in 2020. I had people caught, like my phone was ringing. People like, we're just looking for Black stuff, shaking the trees. Where is the Black stuff? We need to like publish some Black stuff. And it sort of died down now as people have been, if people have sort of, I mean, it's just like, now related to Bill, like, you can't have too many Black TV shows, right? Like, we're going to pass because we have too many Black TV shows. I was talking to John Jenkins about this last week. And so like, and it's really interesting that right? And it's almost like you need some public outcry about something in order for Hollywood to remember. Also, they have Hollywood is legitimately an that has to go to the bathroom at the door, right? They don't think about anything else except for going to the bathroom. And when they come back in, it's just like, you know what? I don't, I'm good now. I'm fine. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to pay any attention to you, right? And so I think that's media in general is when it looks for Black representation, but publishing is a growing space, mostly because it doesn't have to be cyclical. Ekbach, where I met Bill for the first and all of the the Black comic book conventions that John Jennings puts on, and all of the other ones, like there's one here in Boston that's coming up in April. Like it's almost like, and I think people don't understand that these aren't shows, right? I go to those shows and there are lots of white people there, and there like other people there, but it's kind of like going to an HBCU, right? It's like a place where you no longer have to be a Black artist. You are just an artist and you have a story.
Right.
I always say it's kind of like going to, if you're a Black, quote unquote, Black Republican and you go to Howard, you're no longer a Black Republican. You're just like that asshole over there, right? You're no longer, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's refreshing for people. Like that's refreshing for even Black conservatives to no longer have to be like the one person. And I think, the one, and I think that's an important thing about looking, going to look Black people on the cover. You're not going to have to look for yourself, right? And it seems like a small thing, right? But I make this argument all the time. After, like, when Black Panther, the first Black Panther movie came out, like, I am a grown man. I went to watch that movie, and when they had the entire like counting scene, I started crying. Right? Not because like it was emotional. It was just like I just never seen that many Black people on the screen and
Right.
felt that proud of that. You know what I mean? And if I had been, when I was a little kid, seeing T'Challa and Black Panther, and had been exposed to it in the same way that I was exposed to Batman, I would have grown up wanting to be them and not Batman. Because honestly, T'Challa is a better person because he doesn't run around beating up poor people, right? And Batman, that's his Batman's whole mythos is Barry Goldwater's idea of law and order, right? It's like that is exactly who Batman is, and so I think that whole idea of like representation is just like right after Black came out, and I saw little white kids running around with Black Panther masks on, and it made me so happy. Like it made me just so happy because it's like, like that's the superhero that we need. So, so long story short, typical people have money, and we want to be represented.
I was
A little
going to
bit of
share
money.
a little bit. I was going to share too. I think we're starting to see what we think of as our next generation. I have two boys, two sons, and similar to what Black Panther meant to us, I think there's a character that has a similar impact for that generation, and that's Miles Morales, Spider-Man. Like they don't know Spider-Man as Peter Parker; they know Spider-Man as Miles Morales. Like I had the privilege of working on the second film that's coming out in June, and
nice.
And just being able to see the diversity. I mean, you've seen the trailers for it. If you haven't, please check it out. The trailer for it is absolutely one of the most insanely beautiful, diverse, animated, features. It's like Soul and Marvel met, and had a child, and this is what became of it. And my 15-year-old is online chatting it up with all of his friends about how dope that movie looks and how awesome the video games are. Unfortunately, they're not talking comics, but they are talking comics. These things came from the comics, and that gave me another bit of spark from my creative side to say, our creativity, the things that we're creating right now, hopefully, with the same mindset and the same vision, we can create these things that will be the next thing that the future generations will be talking about online or, Zoom or whatever. Maybe it might be telepathic at some point. Technology is so far fastly advancing, but that's the thing that I see now is that and yes, it's only one per se, right? You got your trophy piece, if you will, that one commodity that seems to, but underneath that is just a plethora of branches that stem from that one tree, and that's the thing that, from a creator-owned side, we can have those opportunities now, but we also have the power because we own these things. Those other things, the reason why we did Bitterroot was because we saw an opportunity to actually own something. And that's the other side of this too, with these gentlemen here and with Chuck and David, we're owners of these things, and that's another form of empowerment that is different from where it's been.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of interesting because nowadays I just come at it from a different perspective because I'm in PG County, and I don't know if a lot of you know, but we're like an affluent majority Black county. So my kids are growing up in a completely different atmosphere than I did. It's majority Black, and it's like 83% brown. So brown is the default here, where in pop culture, white is the default. So there are things that happen that are really funny. So like Moana, like how far I go, like has me in tears because I took my daughter there. And like to me, it was amazing because my daughter gets to see some little Disney princess that looks like her, and it was normal. Right? So for her, it was a movie, and me, like I can still like thinking about it, I get teary eyed, right? And my kids are growing up with that. So like for me, like Joel, you were just talking about the Hollywood and all that stuff. It's like because their default is white, but like their challenge is this is about to be a majority brown country, right? So do you go with the default, which is for them their identity, right? Because I mean the white people folks still run it, like the culture at hand, or do you go with where the money is, which is us? Right. So that's going to be the battle, and the battle for us is just to keep it going until our children's generation can just take it over. So like that's us, because I mean there are like flashes of backlash trying to happen already, and the backlash will happen. It's just a matter of what we do, because we don't want it to return to like the 80s, right? Right. The 70s had disco and blaxploitation, and all of a sudden you're like we could like literally, since we're all roughly the same age, we all know like all the black actors of the 80s. Like we still have, like we all know who Grant Bush is. Think about this. We know who Grant Bush is. Like that's how deep it was.
Also,
So,
like what you said about like the TV shows, and this is a little bit about what Sanford said. Can I just say, just like as a quick aside, how angry I am at racists for making me have to go see the new Little Mermaid? Because I don't care about that movie. I've never cared about that story or that movie, but because it's a black mermaid and everybody was freaking out, I got to go support it now. Because of racists, we can't have nice things. Go ahead, Bill.
I'll let you do that. I'll let you take that bullet for me. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your service.
So we've talked about some of your observations, trends, developments that you're seeing. Our charge is also to offer some practical advice to folks out there who may want to be where you are. And so let me ask each of you, what is one piece of, again, practical advice, not shoot for the stars, practical advice that you wish you had heeded a bit more when you were just starting out? Or Bill, for instance, if you, as an editor, what is one piece of advice you wish new art comics artists and writers would listen to? So advice, one piece of advice from your experience.
Oh God, I have so many.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, he said Bill, Joel. Bill. Bill. Bill.
It all sounds the same. It's Bill, Joel. It's all the same.
It's collaborative overlapping is what I'm doing. It's collaborative.
We're remixing here. I have so many. So I'll give a couple real quick. So first, Octavia, I was at a thing where Octavia Butler said that success does not go to the most talented, but the most persistent. And when she said it, I was in my 20s and I thought she was full of it. But now that I'm in my 50s, I realize that she was right. 2, don't quit your day job, because the economics of art do not work in a capitalist society. And 3, you have to realize that a lot of the advice that you get in comics do not work in the rest of the publishing industry. Like how comics sometimes work does not work, is not how publishing works. So if you kind of get like comics advice, don't think that it translates into anything else, because it probably does not, because it's a completely different model. How's that?
I'm curious. that last point that you made, is there something immediately that comes to mind about the not transferring?
Well, I
Sorry.
mean, it's going to sound bad because I'm a publisher. It's sort of like, well, it's sort of like the page rate thing, right? Like it doesn't necessarily work with book publishing.
Right.
um, because that's not the model that we work in. So if you're sitting there saying like, oh, I need X amount per page, we know from how books sell that the book will never make that. So then the page rate thing doesn't work. And everybody else in the publishing industry doesn't work with that kind of rate of pay because books don't make that. I mean, some do, obviously.
But no, I see what you're saying.
But like the average book doesn't sell as much as like an artist wants to charge. And I'm not saying that an artist should not make. I think that everybody should make as much money as possible. I'm just saying, like in the book world, like that's not a thing that works. It works for Marvel and DC because they have like an established customer. They like know how much they're going to make at any given book roughly, so they know how much they can afford. But on different books, depending on who you know, like each different publisher knows roughly what they can do. So if you're going to go like, hey, this is my page rate, and ultimately that's going to cost you 70 grand for just the pencils, and you go, this book at most is going to make 35 grand. So sorry. And that's like, because, this person gets half, the distributor gets this, the book costs this much to print, it's like all that stuff. So it's just sort of like that kind of thing. It's just like they're different models.
Without going too far down that part of the rabbit hole, the thing from that aspect of it, I think based on the audience that's here, that most people aren't necessarily trying to get in this industry as. Then again, I could be wrong. I'll say from both aspects, from a writing aspect and from an illustrator's aspect, or both. I think that to me is kind of ties in with the previous question about whether you see things now versus a few years ago. I think there are more creators now than they are writers or artists, if you will, right? Like in our industry, you were one or the other. You couldn't do both. You couldn't write and draw and create your own story. There's so much more availability now to do all, right? I think with the internet really makes the biggest dent or impact, if you will, in terms of being viable or being visible. Like you can put your work out there for everybody to see. There's no real, you don't have to go through a quote unquote traditional publisher. You can do your own. If you have Instagram or even TikTok, I'm learning about these apps, about how you can utilize these apps to create content, because that's all they are anyway. But why not create content that's based on a concept that you created, a story? You can world build with that in terms of creating the characters, creating the world, and you can post as many times as you can afford to. You can do it. I think an easy kind of, dipping your toe in, in the deep end of the pool approach is to post, something once a week. If you have those, applications, it can even be Facebook. You can put, like, if you're a writer, you can do, you can write some kind of, 2-3 paragraph prose and post it on Facebook once a week. Somebody's going to watch that, and someone's going to keep watching it and following it. That's how you build your audience. You can, there's so much more of these festivals now. There's a book festival literally every weekend at this point. And, you can do research on that stuff. Just go online. I'm pretty sure this festival has connections with other festivals because of the networking involved. make sure you network. This connect with as many people as possible, because it leads to all kinds of other, opportunities. It may not lead to anything other than you meeting a nice person who likes to do the same thing you do. But that's a great place to be, because you now are building a following and a community. And again, I tell that to my students. This is another kind of shameless plug, I guess. I'm teaching a graphics. We're creating a graphic novel at Benedict College right now. There's a grant that we got from Propel and Apple that gave us the opportunity to create this graphic novel. I'm working with young Black men and women I'm literally giving them that same opportunity in terms of creating a community, creating a following, showing them how to utilize their concepts and put it out there for the masses, and not feel, we can get into our neurotic behavior sometimes as creators. We feel a little insecure. We don't want to, but teaching them and showing them that in order to advance in even if it's not a career, if you just want a story you want to tell, you have to be okay with putting it out there, and to some degree being willing to kind of put yourself out there, because that's your story, that's a part of you, and showing them how to get empowerment from that, and not allow yourself to be crippled by fear or insecurities or anything of that nature. So, all that being said is just being a little consistent and building that community, networking, all those things, can help you advance towards your goal.
Sanford, can you hear me? Because I think Kiana and Bill are frozen.
Joe.
No, I'm here. See,
You look frozen to me, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
what? I'm frozen.
No, Joel is frozen, but I can hear him. Yes, I can hear you, Joel.
I can.
And it looks
I
like
can't hear
Sanford
you.
can too, although he's muted.
Yeah, I don't hear anything.
Oh.
Sanford's on mute.
Oh.
And Joel's frozen on my screen.
I muted myself because I didn't.
Oh, you
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, Kiana was
Started to
frozen.
freak out. Like, you got a nice profile pic, Joe.
So,
No, Joel, you're
I think
frozen.
Just to add to that,
Yeah, you're
about
frozen.
what advice I would give.
Yes.
We can hear you though.
We can hear you. You can go ahead.
Okay, so the advice that I would give, which is really something that was told to me. I went to my professor and I asked him, because it was when I really wanted to be a cartoonist, and I said, "How do you break into comic books?" And he said, "Draw a comic." Right, and which seems like the most flippant sort of thing you can tell somebody, but I teach a program, right? And the biggest thing that people don't understand is that it's like, to what Bill said, the idea of making sure that you are working and you are that person who is working. I actually had a conversation with an editor yesterday, and it was like half the battle is picking up the phone and being available, having the work, being available, being that person out there that you can talk to. So like I was in my graduating class, I wasn't the best cartoonist. I'm not at any point I wasn't, but I hustled. And hustling and being professional and finishing stuff is something that I think most people don't understand is like the important part of just making comics. Like, if you want to make comics, you have to make comics. A friend of mine, who's a cartoonist, his name's Alec Longstreth. He teaches at the Center for Cartoon Studies. He also teaches out as well in their MFA program. But he had this whole thing about how over the course of probably a 6 to 8 month period, that he was like, I'm just going to make comics every single day, right? And that's how you hone your craft, right? Like, one of the most newspaper cartoonists in the country, in the world, right, was Ernie Bushmiller, who Nancy. Everybody knows what Nancy is. And he started at 17, like in the newsroom, just drawing, right? Like drawing the puzzles and then drawing Fritzy and like all of the other comics. So I think it can't be understated that there are two types of people in this world. There are people who talk about doing stuff, and there are people who do stuff, and you have to choose if you want to move through the world in that way.
One addendum there. As a publisher,
so Sam, it's just me and you.
You've done it, but as a publisher, once you've done it, you have to start talking about it.
So you know, just in general, like I'm just going to ask you questions about the program you're teaching with students in comics. So and this is undergrad, right?
Me?
Yeah.
Joe? Yeah. It's at Benedict College. It's a what are we calling it? It's pretty much a master class, where these students are 300, 400 level students. They've met all their requirements for their major. So now this is just an elective, but they want to further their possibilities in the field of art, and they took an interest to my field and wanted to know how they just wanted to get a good a better understanding on that. And honestly, just being truthful, the grant really was kind of like manna from heaven. It just kind of was like, all right, we need to do this course because there's a demand for it, but how viable is it if you don't really have for me, I feel like you need to have an end goal, a product, developed. It can't just be something for the class. It needs to be something that we need a printed, product, something that can be shown, displayed, for sold. We're going to have a book signing / Comic-Con type event here, not this semester, but next semester. So all those things are in the works because I feel like the more and this is for any student or anyone that's aspiring to do anything. It doesn't have to be comics. It can be just writing prose. You need something to be able, especially in academia. I feel like, I'm sorry, this is a soapbox thing for me, but I feel like sometimes we can do they do assignments. Like, we know folks, we're all in academics, and we do the assignment and then that's it. There's nothing else to it. And it's kind of like, especially in the arts, it's like you have, for me, I feel like there needs to be something that you can walk away with. And it's more than, this is the controversial part I'm about to say, is more than just getting the grade. You have to have something that's going to, especially if you're interested in this field, even if you're not specifically interested in this field, it can be graphic design even, but something in that realm, you have a real viable experience and portfolio, I think, to show that you have this opportunity, or you had the opportunity to develop something that's tangible that can be shown and displayed in your portfolio as you move forward in your career, possibly. That's just me.
Yeah, I agree with you 100. I agree with you 100%. I think that if you go into a program and you're like, I want to learn how to make comics with, don't go there for an A. You go there to learn to make comics, right? So the end result should be the making of the comics, right? Like that should be. And like, I'm a professor, I teach in academia. That's what I tell my students. Like, your end result should be the making of the comics. So questions. There are questions on there. But one of the questions, and it's the questions for all of us, so that would just be me and you right now, because it's just me and you here, would be, if you had one power and authority to change one thing about the graphic novel industry, what would you change and how? And I don't have all of my publishing experience has been with like book publishers. Like I basically do graphic novels. I don't do monthly comics, so I don't have that same thing. I have a suspicion you might change, Sanford. But what would you change? What would you change if you had an opportunity?
Well, before I answer, I do think I'm seeing Bill and I'm seeing Kiana, so I'm not sure what happened on our
we're both,
somehow.
but can you hear me?
I do see them, but they're both
I don't
frozen.
think so.
No, we're
but
right
you
here,
can't-
man.
But you can't hear us either.
Say that again.
Oh, you must not be able to. You can hear me.
Yeah, he heard you.
Okay. Well,
What? So he can't
It's
hear us,
fine.
Sanford?
Yep. Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure so that if we're going to
Okay.
keep doing this, I know that Kiana, you're the
No,
moderator. So I'm like, oh, Joe's taking
fine.
over, and here we go. Here
Joe
we
is
go.
a great moderator too. That's good.
Yeah, he's
We
awesome.
Can
we
you hear?
keep going with this
Can
question?
you hear Kiana and Bill? Because I can't hear them. They're frozen on my end.
Yeah.
Tell Joe that we think he's suspect.
Oh, look, I don't know. I hope the audience can hear us.
Yeah, can they hear us?
We're doing.
Backstage people?
It appears I'm looking at our chat. They say that yes, the audience can hear all four of us.
hear
So I think,
Okay.
yeah.
Joel,
So
you
Sanford can
see-
relay our questions to Joel.
So I'm the only one that can't hear anybody else. It's just
Well,
I
I'm the
can't
co-host.
hear anybody. And Kiana
Yeah.
and Bill are frozen.
Yeah,
So
you're
that's why
like
I
our
can't talk.
go-between. You're our Joel whisperer.
I'm the Joel Whisperer. Okay. Joel, Bill, and Kiana said they love you, and
That's not what we said. Stop lying.
all about peace and unity. So what would I do?
So I just did a whole lot of
differently?
talking. Yeah. I'll go out and come back in. I'm gonna see if that works. Well, if I leave and come back, I don't know if y'all can hear me, but if I leave and come back, I know that I wasn't able to come. Just be quiet.
Okay.
Well, tell him to also look at the chat.
Look at
if he can.
the chat. I think you're getting some responses there.
Well then,
And there you go.
there you
And
go.
that concludes our exciting panel discussion on comics, graphic novels. What would I do differently? I don't know what the question is. I lost.
The question
You
was.
might as well answer it. I mean, because it
Yeah.
was a question from the crowd. So go ahead and answer it.
Yeah, it was if you had the power and authority to change one thing in the industry, what would you change and how?
If I had the power to change.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, man,
sorry.
we can still hear you.
I'm so sorry. Like it
It's
was like
like
you
you
guys
never
were
left.
frozen. Yeah,
It's
you were
fine.
frozen and Sanford was going. I'm sorry. I was probably just talking. Everybody was like, why does Joel just keep talking? I'm so sorry.
So if we could reel it back in, I guess one thing that I would change, I think, is, I mean, the easy answer is more representation or whatever. But I think to some degree, I would honestly, I would do a lot more. If I could rewind and go back in time, I would do a lot more studying the craft of not comics, but just my craft of art, and really learn. Like I learned from comics, and that's fine. But as you grow in your profession, especially from what I call the traditional side of the profession, like the actual, comics, like the superhero, Marvel, DC stuff, that's the route that I went. And for me, you really have to know your craft when it comes to figure drawing and anatomy and all these different academic aspects of the craft. And I kind of just learned from emotion and gut. It was just raw talent, I guess, and I just kind of morphed it into making it what it is. And I'm just now going back and studying. I do figure drawing classes. I do all this stuff, and I'm teaching. part of the reason why I say that is because I'm looking at the young folks, like the class that I'm teaching now. I look at what they're doing, and they're kind of in that same vein that I was in. Like they see something cool, they're really into anime and manga and those things. Those things are great, but they're coming from a very stylistic viewpoint. Like learn the craft, learn the fundamentals of that craft first, then branch off into, your style. I think that's the thing, I tell students all the time, like LeBron James is a, freak of nature and talent, and he can jump out the gym, but he had to learn how to shoot free throws. He had to learn how to pass the basketball. He had to, those are fundamental things that he added to his talent and became more well-rounded. So that's what I would do.
Can I add some, Bill? I know that you want to weigh in, but I also, with the time remaining, hearing you speak about this and all that Joel had to say before about this, I realize a lot of people who are getting started are going to use Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Webtoon to get themselves out there. If they follow your advice and they're working daily and they're doing those things, just as you just offered, Sanford, I wonder if there are words of caution you might also give for people who use these platforms to sort of instantly get out everything they're doing online. Are there places where you need to make different choices or pull back for, I don't know, ownership and idea? Like, I feel like are there words of caution you might also give to people who are constantly putting themselves out there with their work? And this could be for anybody, but.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I think we're and this might be even what I'm about to say, a cautionary statement. I think we're in the wild west of information now. Like there's so much, there's all kinds of apps, there's all kinds of, platforms. And, again, like the webtoons, which is probably the safer, more controlled area. But if that's not really your thing, and webtoons, for those who aren't aware, is a digital comics. It's weekly. It's kind of like back in the days when you get your daily newspaper or weekly newspaper and get the comic strips there. Just imagine it in digital form, and it's all original content. So there's that, and it's a huge platform. It's huge,
right?
And that's probably the safest place if you want to do comics and post online. Cautionary from the standpoint. And I guess that's basically it, because this is just me. I think that any idea that you have and you put it out there for the world to see, and someone, because I think what you're alluding to is someone might, take the idea or steal the idea or profit the idea. I think this is where your creativity, you have to put in some work to where you're not just putting out any old idea just to do it. Make sure this idea is something that you really, truly believe in. I think someone gave me this advice a while back too. Like I wanted to try to go into writing, but I know that there's a million writers out there. What would separate me from everyone else? And honestly, it's just my story. Every last one of us has our own story. I think that's a great place to start. And it doesn't have to be like verbatim your life history or whatever. It just has to be your story, something that may have derived from your life experiences that's unique to your life. And you use that as your base. So that's unique. So if someone wants to go and take that, possibly now it's a little more glaringly obvious that that's something that, that's something I did, it's really,
really personalize it.
Yeah, it's really personalized. So, of course they can always change it to a white person or whatever, but then it's a story that's unique to you. But again, it is a cautionary, statement to say that the internet is the Wild West, but for the most part, everyone wants to tell their own stories anyway. Who wants to, I wouldn't want to tell someone else's story. Why would I want to take that? There are some that may want to do that, but I think you have to, you have to be wise. You have to be cautious. I wouldn't put every single idea that you ever thought of on the internet. That's not wise.
But okay. Well,
yeah.
let's see what Bill, why don't you weigh in?
What was it? The one thing I would change?
The one thing you would change, or any of the words of caution?
Okay, so the one thing I would change. So one of the reasons that I started Rosarium was while I was writing Coontown, one of the realizations that I had was he who controls the narrative holds all the power, right? Because if they can say anything about you, they can do anything to you, right? So that was one of the things was, brown folks in particular need to start controlling their own narratives, and that's why I started Rosarium. But so the one thing that I would change, because Rosarium is a place where you don't have to worry about the white mediated gaze. Like you don't have to worry about what the white editor would think or the white publisher would think, because I ain't white. But as the publisher, there aren't too many brown folks who are publishers or store owners or journalists or librarians who make purchasing decisions. So being a Black publisher is actually exceedingly frustrating, because the system is built with its own obstacles, and then just any miscellaneous person can just throw an obstacle in your way just because it's Tuesday. Or noon, or they're on their way to the water fountain. Just like it's just like that, right? So like the one thing I would really change is like literally more of us marginalized people, as though marginalization is a magical thing, to just smash that marginalization. And I'm not talking about trying to be diverse, because that's a white construct, right? Because there's the world that is, and then there's diversity, right? Because like 93% of the world is brown, and just kind of work towards that. By hook or by crook, what was it? The Audre Lorde said, like, you can't, destroy the master's house with the master's tools. And I say you can destroy the house with any tools that are available. And that's the one thing I would change, is just us, like, making that switch. And that's just in pretty much all the industries. It's just us making that switch. Like, 93% of the world is brown. Yeah.
I love that the artists are you guys sketching and sketching as you think?
Yeah, I'm
Joe,
dry.
I was teasing you before. You really were not talking that much. I mean, it was all good.
No, I felt bad because I couldn't.
I
really could not. Yeah, I really.
Joel, later on, I'm going to make fun of you for talking so much.
No.
And he's frozen again.
He's frozen again.
Oh, no.
And scene.
No. Well, Joe, while you're still with us, I would like to hear if you want to weigh in on any of the questions or comments that have been made in the last few minutes. I'll note that we've sort of shifted to the post-panel conversation. So if people have things they want to put in the chat, I can help to relay some of those things, but we're moving into the optional part of the conversation, if that makes sense.
I think he's frozen again.
Oh, no.
Oh,
no, I can see you. Okay.
I think you have to be still.
Like my internet, my internet is fine. I keep checking it. I don't know what's going on. The only thing that I would add to that is that, you know, I feel like there's this line in a Jay-Z song where he says, "You still taking deals for real?"
Oh, no.
And hey, he got it out. He got the quote out. That's great.
Yeah, I know.
The
Like,
quote
so we just contemplate that.
Yeah.
No. Okay, now he's not going to say anything, even if we could see him moving.
I think that's a great point. He
It is a
ended
good
with a
point.
great quote.
It was a good quote.
Yeah.
It's like instead of like a mic drop, we get like a screen freeze. Like, like
There you go. Oh. So, okay, let me make sure to right the ship a little bit. I'm looking for in the chat. There's like 3 different chats to make sure that I'm getting all the questions. If I'm not, please flag and let me know. How do you all decide which projects to not take, to decline?
That's I got a mortgage, man. I got a mortgage and a new truck. I don't know if I can answer that with
Okay. 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 How about we'll flip it. When you're presented with an opportunity, what makes you say yes in addition to the mortgage?
money.
My-
It just I told you I couldn't answer this thing with
Okay.
I'm not gonna
Okay.
give
he's
you
an artist. He's a working artist.
working artist, man. You gotta I mean,
It's like
you know,
actors, you know.
yeah. I mean, well, I say that's definitely important. You know, but I think also is the project something that, you know, honestly speaks to you? I mean, because there have been things that came across my desk that it's twofold. There's some things that I felt like, that's not me. I'm not really into that. I don't know. I couldn't give you an example right now, but overall, I could say, yeah, there are things that I wasn't really connecting with that I would pass on, and then there's things that I would feel initially, I don't know about this, and I give it some thought because there's still a window of time to make a decision, and I go back to it, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm glad I did that project. So, you know, you just have to kind of learn yourself, you know, and that comes with time and experience or whatever. So.
I would say as a publisher, like I basically look because you know we focus mainly on brown folks, but we publish folks from all around the world, and literally I just really look for like idiosyncratic styles. And while it can be entertaining or funny, I just look for people that have something like interesting or different to say. You know, a lot of people think that they do, but they kind of don't. So it's just something that just kind of like sticks with you because we're independent, right? Like the bigger publishers, they already have, I mean, they have their things, and we can't beat them at their own game. Like I can't come out with like just a straight up superhero project because that's taken care of. Like I can come up with a superhero project with like a really different angle, like, but it would have to be like a really different angle, like, you know. So there are things that like bigger publishers do that, you know, it just doesn't make sense for us to try to emulate. So for us, we're just looking at things like, oh wow, that is just like a really interesting idea. That's like a great art style. That this writer has like this really interesting take on something, because even if it takes like a really long time, like it'll catch, right? Like Blue Hand Mojo, you know, Jennings thing, like that took years before people like were like, oh, this is like great. And I was like, yes. You know?
Finally, you see.
Like I tried to tell you in 2014, but okay, whatever. You know, like, you know. But those are the things, because that's like how we have to work, right?
Right.
So ours is always like this really long, slow march. So for me, it's just like, okay, this person just came out with this thing that people might not go like, hey, you're a genius, but I mean, it's like Mothership, right? I mean, it was like Mothership came out for people to know. People were like, "Oh, wow, this is great," but it took like 3 years for it to get reviewed by like the major science fiction ways. And then what was it? 2021, NPR was like, "This is like one of the most important books of this generation," right? like literally like 8 years after it came out, right? But that's
Okay.
how we have to roll as an independent, especially as a Black publisher, because
Think
they don't
about
like
that long
recognizing
term.
us. Yeah, you have to think
So,
about, yeah.
so someone in the chat has asked if you could talk a little bit more about Rosarium's submission process. So for people who may want to contact you,
Well,
how might that work?
yeah, that's always a good question. Because I literally don't really have a submission process. Like people can, email me at bill@rosariumpublishing.com. Um,
You can also send him cookies, baked goods. He looks like he loves,
I love snickerdoodles.
okay, there you go. You want to book publish, that's your end. That's your end.
Bill takes
well, I would say
bribes. They
this.
just
I would
don't
say
change
this.
his mind. Bill takes bribes. They just
There
don't
you
change his
go.
I
mind.
like that. I like that. That's a good one. No, I would say this. Especially if we're talking comics. At this point, it would have to be done.
Okay, needs to be a finished product, not a pitch.
Yeah, not a pitch. Like just because, because most comics ideas don't get done, and as a publisher, you can't afford for things not to get done.
I was going to share really quick about that too. I think a great bit of advice for any publisher. I think that's the requirement for the most part. Like even in comics, I know our publisher, Image Comics, they want at least 3. If you're wanting a series, they wanted 3 issues already done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before you submit anything. So it's not even a thing of, oh, I got this really cool idea. It's like, okay, is a cool idea going to get done? Is it going to be finished? Can we trust you if we are willing to put in and invest in your, product that you're going to, we're going to get this return. And so, that's the biggest thing. So I tell everyone that, at least have you might have a cool idea, but, get some work in the can.
Yeah, because people don't realize, like, if you don't finish something, that really costs the publisher a lot of time and money. Like, it's like something that you don't see on your end, but it's really costly. So, like, when I first started, another publisher was like, "Yeah, don't take anything that's not done." I was like, "Pshaw," and now, almost 10 years into it, I'm like, "Yeah, that's real." Like,
Okay.
Because there's like really no indicator on our end that something will get finished. A person's rep, their history, all that stuff, like nothing, literally, there's no predictor except that something gets done. So if it's a comics thing, like that thing needs to be as close to done as possible. And then, bill@rosariumpublishing.com. And then, of course, if it's a novel, it also just needs to be done.
I missed a cue from backstage, and I need to make sure that I'm on point with my moderating duties. I thought this was post panel, but we need to actually shift to another area, or rather those who want to continue a conversation can shift to the post panel discussion, because there's another panel coming on this stage at 1. Am I relaying all the correct information? Hopefully, yes. Okay, we're good. I want to thank you so much, Bill, Sanford, and Joel, for sharing your wisdom and your jokes. We really appreciate all the insight, and good luck with your work. I cannot wait to look at Stamped. And Bill, I know you've got a lot of new things coming out. And Sanford, I definitely want to ask more questions about the next Miles Morales film. So good luck to all of you with your projects, and thank you so much, everyone who's watching, for joining us.
Kiana,
Yes,
really quick. Oh,
Oh.
I'm gonna be there tomorrow in person. If anyone is going
Oh,
to be,
yes.
I don't know if these guys will be or not. Are you gonna be here tomorrow, Kiana? Are you coming down?
No, I'm not. I'm still in Columbia. I will
Okay,
still be in Columbia tomorrow, but you're
understood.
going to be in Charleston to sign things and
Yeah, at the actual
okay,
event. So if anyone is
wonderful.
interested, um, see me there.
Okay, thank you for mentioning that. Maybe one day we can get Bill and Joel in person as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for
That'd
having
be
Okay,
us.
great.
thanks
Thank y'all.
everyone.